Hi everyone, with The Violet Reality, I'm Casey Rain, and this is Prince's book, The Beautiful Ones. We've had the book for over a month now, and despite having gone over and read it several times, this is still one of the hardest reviews I've ever had to make. You might have heard criticism that he didn't finish the memoir, so what is this? And that it's possible to read it all in one sitting. Whilst that is true, this book isn't something that as a fan you'll read chronologically. Like Prince himself, this book defies the concept of time. And even more like Prince, there's a solid chance that this book actually raises more questions than it answers. Many of the questions have already been asked. Is this the book that he wanted to make? Is this book worthy of the name Prince? Does this book give us a real insight into Prince? And the answer, again, in true purple form, can be both yes and no to all of them. The biggest question of all is, should you buy this? And thankfully, the answer to that question is 100% yes. Let's explore why. We'll tell you what the book is, what it isn't, what it's about, and whether it should take pride of place on your shelf. Now, if you don't want to know spoilers, you should stop watching this video right now. Now, the book opens with editor Dan Piepenbring's final conversation with Prince on the night of April 17th, 2016, right after the infamous episode where Prince overdosed on a plane ride back from what would be his final show in Atlanta. In this conversation, Prince makes reference to the concept of cellular memory, the idea that our bodies could hold memories from our parents and our ancestors. And he noted his lifelong conflict between the orderly, the restricted, and the wild and loose. He believed that he embodied the order of his father and the freedom and spontaneity of his mother. This conflict might well remind you of the song When Doves Cry. Often considered to be fictitious in the sense that it was written for the film Purple Rain, the exploration of this idea makes us feel that maybe this song was more true to life than we had perhaps thought. Dan goes on to tell the story of how he submitted his proposal through his agent, was called out to Paisley Park to meet with Prince, and the conversation that ultimately led to him being hired. I'll spare you the details, you should read this, but it's a fascinating insight into Prince's state of mind in his final months before his passing. But it's Dan's recollections of the direct quotes from Prince that are perhaps the most telling. His quotes range from references to movies, to his frustrations with the music industry, to his annoyances that people compared him with artists that he didn't feel he had anything in common with, like Bruce Springsteen, saying, "Why don't people compare me to Carlos Santana or Sly Stone?" He questions why Warner Brothers never felt that he could be the president of the label. He labors on the types of words and adjectives that he felt Dan or the writer should use, mentioning that magic was Michael Jackson's word, a word used to describe Michael's music and not a word that he felt really applied to his music. But what's really clear about this section is that Prince had wide, arching concepts of what his book should be, and what he probably needed help with was kind of pinning that down into an order and a narrative. The book then skips forward to the Australian part of the Piano and a Microphone tour in February 2016, and it's in between these two events that Prince seems to have written the 30 or so pages of the actual memoir that will later appear in this book, bringing Dan out to Australia to discuss this with him. What's abundantly clear in this section is that Prince just didn't know how to switch his mind off. He didn't understand how to relax. Perhaps he didn't even want to. That's an important point, and we'll get back to that. Even after performing one of the Piano and a Microphone shows, and then going to an after party, hanging out with Dan and Kirk at the after party, in the early hours of that morning, Prince is still throwing ideas at Dan, such as one particular moment where he mentions perhaps them doing a golden ticket promotion for the book. It's almost as if, despite having not even written more than the initial set of notes for the book at this point, he just couldn't stop thinking about the business and the release and the marketing and all these ideas and everything about the business and the release of the project as a whole. The next day, it appears that he and Dan started working on structures and the guiding principles of the book, about how music is healing and the importance of black ownership. In this talk, he attacks the concepts of objectivism, the concepts of Ayn Rand and her acolytes, and how these ideas have seeped into the music business and hip-hop. It's powerful, compelling stuff. The book then skips forward to the announcement party in March 2016 in New York, and then full circle back to that final phone call between Dan and Prince, and then going on past Prince's passing and Dan's journey from that point to where we are now. This section is really important because it frames everything about the book, about what it was intended to be, what it is, and what it isn't. And it's really the only part of the book that tells an actual story from beginning to end. But it's not Prince's story, it's Dan's. For the next 60 or so pages, we get the portion of the memoir that Prince had completed, both the scans of his handwritten words and the typed up version, complete with additional notes. There's a real beauty in reading Prince's own handwritten words. They really leap off the page and come alive. So I'm glad that they included those as well as the typed up version. Prince's notes are also included, and they've also included appropriate, relevant photos of Prince's parents, Prince as a child, his sister Tyka, those amazing photos from his early and teenage years. Remember the part right at the beginning that I said in Dan's intro about Prince feeling the conflict of his two parents and how that informed his life? That's explored in great detail in the part of the memoir that Prince actually completed. Now, without wishing to draw any artistic comparisons, if anyone watching this is familiar with the work of Nirvana and the songs of Kurt Cobain, Kurt once said that his parents' divorce was the defining moment in his life that led him from being Kurt Cobain the person to Kurt Cobain the artist. And there's a strong parallel here with Prince in that his parents' divorce is a hugely important part of his life, not just the divorce itself and the separation, but what led up to it and what followed. There's this conflict about how Prince was really close to his mother. In fact, the quote on the back of the book references, you know how you can tell when someone is smiling just by looking in their eyes, and that's about his mother. But the conflict is that Prince's father was his hero, and he relished the point in his life where he was able to move in with his father after the separation because he was just so inspired by his father as a person and a musician. Prince's own writing about how all this impacted his life is perhaps the most compelling part of this section, along with the revelation that he believed that his childhood seizures came from his overactive, overthinking brain. It's really interesting stuff. Now, it's long been questioned whether the domestic abuse shown in the movie Purple Rain was true to life or fictional, and in this memoir, Prince affirms it to be true, describing physical fights between his mother and father as soul-crushing. Prince goes on to tell stories about his first kiss, the girls at his high school who he had relationships with, his thoughts on love, lust, and slow jams. And that's sadly where the memoir portion of this book abruptly ends. And although the memoir portion is chronological, the notes that Prince wrote reference all kinds of different things, from The Matrix to the relationships between musicians in Minneapolis to the previously shared attack on music industry conglomerates and the artists who benefit the most from them. Next, we move into the section of the book that is entitled For You, the name of Prince's first album. That's why I wore this shirt today. And this is mostly a photo diary of photos taken during 1977 and 1978 during the writing, recording, and mixing process for Prince's debut album. Many of the photos contain humorous captions from Prince, and there's handwritten lyrics to some of the songs from the album, including Soft and Wet and Baby. One incredible section in this part is a handwritten track list of what Prince felt would be his debut album, which is radically different to what actually came out and contains song titles that were never released or perhaps never even recorded that we haven't heard of before, such as a track called Body Freeze. Another interesting factoid is that Prince either planned or did actually record a cover for his first album, a cover of the famous song Send in the Clowns, although he attributes it to being written by Judy Collins rather than the actual writer of the song, Stephen Sondheim, which might indicate that his cover would have been closer to the Judy Collins version. If you actually listen to the Judy Collins version of that song, it's not too hard to imagine Prince singing that in his soft teenage falsetto. Now, the third section of the book, entitled Controversy, this is one for those of us who love to just pore over every single photograph of Prince. There's alternate cover shots from his second album, the self-titled one, as well as his third album, Dirty Mind. There's also more handwritten lyrics to songs both released and as yet unreleased, and more humorous Polaroids from behind the scenes. There's the original hand-drawn montage that became the 1999 album cover, and this section is accompanied by quotes from appropriate Prince interviews. Following this, we get the handwritten treatment for the film Dreams, which is what became Purple Rain, once again both handwritten and typed. One of the things that stands out for me is the absolutely terrible ending that he wrote in his first pitch idea of this movie, which in true Dallas style revealed the events of the film to be no more than a dream. Something that would have become a pretty funny movie cliche had it actually ever made it to the big screen. One of the other interesting things is the original track list of songs that Prince intended to be in the movie, only two of which, Baby I'm a Star and I Would Die For You, actually made it into what became Purple Rain. Now, what's really interesting is that on that track list, you've got two songs, Can't Stop This Feeling I Got and Bold Generation, which later became New Power Generation. And of course, if you're a big Prince fan, you know that both of those songs ended up in the 1990 sequel to Purple Rain, Graffiti Bridge, which kind of shows that there is a much stronger musical link between Purple Rain, or the early versions of what became Purple Rain, and the later on Graffiti Bridge, which is very cool. This section goes on to include the handwritten lyrics to several iconic Prince songs such as Purple Rain, Kiss, Raspberry Beret, The Beautiful Ones, and Darling Nikki, amongst others. The lyrics to Darling Nikki show a frankly terrible and hilarious unused verse to the song, which Prince had the good sense to not include, a verse that somehow manages to completely destroy the mystique of the character Nikki and be frankly sexist at the same time. So well done, Prince, for not including that. We then get more unseen photos and interview quotes. The book ends with a fascinating appendix detailing information about many of the photos included in the book, including relevant quotes, locations, notes, and information about some of the lyric sheets that are in there. And thus, the book reaches its conclusion. And so it's time for our conclusion too. Firstly, the book is stunningly well presented and laid out. The structure aims to make sense of what Prince wrote of the memoir, with relevant information, photographs, notes, and so many previously unseen items and artifacts. It's a goldmine for fans, although one that frustratingly only covers the first 30 years or so of his life, which, aside from his childhood, isn't an era that was scant on information beforehand. It would have been amazing to document more, the 1990s and beyond, his fight with Warner Brothers, his innovative and pioneering ideas for music distribution in the modern age. But perhaps those are other books, and perhaps those would be books that would be aimed more at fans and not the general public. You see, the publishers here had the difficult job of trying to put together an unfinished project with other material that would also appeal to the masses. And the unfortunate truth of the matter is that what appeals to the masses is 1999, Purple Rain, and Parade. The memoir section is hugely informative about a part of Prince's life that we never heard about when he was here. But aside from what was written of the memoir, it might be the 1977 For You photo diary section that's the most insightful. It's the perfect bridge between Prince's childhood, teen years, and what he would go on to become. The superstar, the guy who revolutionized the music business in the 1980s and beyond. One simply cannot imagine 80s Prince being as playful and innocent as he was during this time frame in these photos. Some of you might have already seen the photo where he's wearing like a fake nose and things like that. And the cover photo, of course, is from a set where he's actually posing with a fake plastic hand. It's really funny. And so this part is an absolute treasure for fans. Likewise, all the handwritten lyrics are absolutely amazing to see. And indeed, there have been entire books on other artists that are just comprised of these sort of artifacts. So to have that together with the memoir, I think, was a great move. Now, if I could make some criticisms, I would say that the memoir, the childhood section of Prince, I think it could have benefited from some other voices at times. I can see that aside from Dan's intro, there was an obvious effort to make it all Prince's words, but I can't help but feel that there would have been some amazing insight from folks like Andre Simone, who I hope writes his own book one day. There are very few people who can offer insight into this time, so it would be amazing to hear from someone like Andre and Bobby Z. Luckily, both Morris Day and Owen Husney, two other people who were around at this time, both have their own books out already that offer insight into this time period, and I would highly recommend reading both of them. Additionally, I think it would have been amazing to hear some insight from some family members, such as Prince's sister Tyka or his cousin Chaz Smith. But those are all pieces of a complex jigsaw, and perhaps all of these people will have the opportunity to tell their own story, and that will help us piece it all together. And whilst we will sadly never get all of the jigsaw pieces from Prince, what we do have is some very, very valuable and insightful pieces of that puzzle. Now, the final question. Should you buy this book? Absolutely. But be prepared to finish it with the same attitude that Prince lived his life, that we may never get all the answers, and that ultimately his story is never finished. Prince is forever. And whilst this isn't the memoir that we all wanted, it's an important, beautiful, and historic artifact. Thank you to the Prince Estate, to Penguin Random House, and to Dan Piepenbring. And most importantly, thank you, Prince. We love you, we miss you, and you are always with us. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this review, please share, like, drop a comment, and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. If you haven't ordered the Prince book, The Beautiful Ones, yet, there is a link in the description. My name is Casey Rain. We are The Violet Reality, and we'll catch you next time.